bonjour, bienvenue, possibly a slightly overdramatic countdown, but here we are, once again, yomping into the new year. I am very pleased to say that in the virtual studio, I have Jiten, Chavda of Expat Finance in Sweden, and we're talking today really focusing on the fact that this is the start of the new year, start of new things. A lot of people I know have had a middling Christmas. It's neither been one thing or another. Some people have been, it's been rocky on their relationships. Other, it's been rocky on their finances. And I guess, Jiten, and welcome, by the way, this is the time to try and put a plan in place, or at least have a perspective on what's going forward. What do you think?
I think you're 100% correct on that. A lot of people, at the beginning of the year, have New Year's resolutions, and most people just fall by the wayside with their New Year's resolution within a week or two. And financial planning is also one of those, which, you know, in the last year, I've had clients, many clients say to me, "Oh, we'll talk about the new year. We'll talk about the new year." So the idea is to start planning. What are your plans for this year? What do you want to achieve this time next year from a financial point of view? Where do you want to be? And the idea is to look at where you like to be and work out a game plan throughout the year, making sure that you're achieving that goal. Now, that's where a financial advisor actually can help, because there's a few changes that will happen in Sweden this year with investments. So the idea is to utilize.
Can we focus in on those? I mean, there's been, I believe, there are changes that you can, if you can either take notice of them or ignore them. And if you take notice of them, they could put you in a better state going forward.
Yeah, you know, most people that come from from the UK are used to ISAs, tax-free savings. £20,000 a year you can put away and it's tax-free. People aren't aware there's a similar system that available in Sweden, where it's actually 150,000 crowns you can put in this year, which is going to be tax-free. Next year it's going to be increased to 300,000. So the idea is to utilize.
Forgive me. What 150,000 crowns is?
About £12,000.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, you know, you've got that allowance. So the idea is to utilize that allowance every single year that you can. But the most important thing is when you open an investment like this, it's the same as a UK ISA. What funds do you pick? Why do you pick these funds? And people actually don't realize that they're saving money, but they don't know what they're saving the money for. And because they don't know what they're saving the money for, what type of investment portfolio they should have. Because if you're saving for the short term, it'll be a totally different portfolio than if you're saving for the long term.
Quite.
And I've had enough clients come to me that have done these investments in Sweden, and their funds have all dropped. And they're saying, why have my funds dropped? Because you picked wrong funds, and they're expensive funds. So the idea is to make sure that's what my speciality is, looking at portfolios and creating portfolios which is suitable for that client, for that purpose that they need it for.
So each client will differ. In what ways would they?
No, they don't really differ. I do a risk analysis with clients. I have a questionnaire that I fill in with clients, and based on that, I get a point system. And on that point system, I know where they are from a risk level, and that portfolio I'll create will be based on that. And so for short-term investments, it's always very low risk. For longer-term investments, it's often higher risk, depending on how many years you've got before you need the money. So it's an important one to bear in mind. Other people that have come to me this year or last year, which I'm already trying to sort things out for them, is people that have got investments in the UK, ISAs being a good example. Because I don't know if everybody's aware, even though it's tax-free in the UK, because you're based in Sweden, when you cash in your ISA, it's tax liable in Sweden.
Right.
And people aren't aware of things like that.
The moment it gets cashed,
sorry,
the moment you cash out your ISA, but you're based in Sweden, that's when it becomes due, does it?
Yes, you have to pay tax on it. And people think, oh well, but there are options that people want to keep the ISAs because they may want to go back to the UK. So if you're back in the UK, then guess what? It's tax free again. So you cash in at tax free. Now there are options that people have got that because your investments in the UK, you can't get a UK advisor advising you on it because you're based in Sweden. And a Swedish advisor can't advise you because your investment's in the UK. So you're getting no investment advice on your investment. What we can now do is we can actually move that to an FCA regulated company where an external a Swedish advisor can actually advise you on that investment. So in that way, we should, and then it's still kept as tax-free. So if you do go back to the UK, it's still tax-free. But at least you're getting advice on your investment.
But there are parts of the advice you give because that vary throughout the year depending on changing circumstance, don't they?
Yeah, and the market changes. You know, last year, because of the election, the American election, people were a bit cautious about where the investments were going to go. So the markets weren't sure what to do.
And the corollary of that, of course, is we now got in January where Trump 2.0.
Yeah.
I would have thought that has an effect on people's willingness to invest.
The good news is that Trump actually, from an investment point of view, is good to have Trump there because he understands investment returns, so he's going to keep a lot of things fairly solid. So I think we're going to see a good year this year as far as the markets are concerned, unless we get anything drastic happen, any war or anything like that happening. I think it's going to be a fairly good year because interest rates are going down, inflation is going down, things are fitting into place for this year. So keep our fingers crossed for investment. But you know what you mustn't do is you mustn't actually just leave your investment without actually monitoring it. Keep an eye on it. People don't. The one that always annoys me the most is pensions. People have pensions, and because their pensions are 20, 30 years down the line, they don't think they need to monitor it. They just leave it. And the most important thing is monitoring those investments that you've got. You know, if you had insurance on your house, you would actually look at other companies when it comes to renewal. When it comes to your investments, you should look at different funds because things may have changed. So it's very important that people review their investments.
A very good friend of both you and I, Jalpa, who focuses very much on making sure that you're on top of your finances, said to me, there's no point taking your eye off the ball because you won't necessarily be able to take advantage of change.
Exactly. That's 100% correct. You've got to be focused because you work so hard to make the money. Why not actually make the money work for you? You know, spend a bit of time making the money working for you rather than just letting the money accumulate and not do very much. I have many clients that got money just sitting in cash. And you start thinking, well, why are you doing that? Well, where else should I put it? Come and talk to me and we can talk about where we can invest it. So it is important to review things like that. On a slightly different note, I don't know what the weather's like there in the UK, but in Sweden at the moment, it's been a lot of snow and ice and so forth. I don't know if you've had that there.
Yes, we've got middling, mostly miserable, where the weather hasn't made up its mind whether it's going to be whether it's going to be a proper full-on snow or whether it's just going to be mush. And we tend to having cold snaps. Yeah. So it's at the moment right outside, blisteringly cold and quite unpleasant, but hovering around about between -1 and +5 where I am.
Okay. It's going to be we came back from a skiing holiday early simply because of the snow conditions, because there was going to be a lot of snow coming down. And
there's irony. You came back from a skiing holiday because of too much snow.
Here's something I want to mention to all the people in Sweden that are listening to this. I did a little experiment with my daughter where we're discussing Swedish people talking to other Swedish people. And Swedish people don't talk to people. So if you're at a bus stop, you're not going to talk to a stranger there. You ignore them. And if you're walking down the street, you might get somebody to say hello to you, but not very often will people stop to have a conversation with you. So I want my children to be in a position where they can talk to anybody without feeling any fear of talking to people. Right. So we were on the chairlift, and I said, before we went into the chairlift, I asked my daughter, said, ask me something to find out from somebody sitting next to me on the chairlift. My daughter said, okay, a silly thing, get the person sitting next to you their mother's name. Okay, fine. So I got into the chairlift, going along, and an old couple sitting next to me. And it was a bit difficult because at the time I wasn't sure whether they could speak Swedish or English and so forth. So I started speaking to them in English, and we got on fairly well. And eventually I said, oh, what's your mother's name by any chance? He told me his mother's name and everything. And afterwards I said to my daughter, you need to be able to do this. You need to be able to go up to somebody and find out something from somebody to show that you're not scared. Because a lot of people in Sweden are not willing to do this. So go and talk to as many people as you can. Find out peculiar things about that person. And it's a great way of living life. Because you never know who that person might be.
Well, I think it's actually an allegory for people who are in sales as well. The best way for building a relationship is to build that relationship, and part of that is finding out interesting things about that person,
Yeah.
so that you're then aware, so you know when their birthdays are, then you
Mm.
know when the major, like for instance, one of my clients had a bouncing baby boy middle of last year, and every so often I drop into conversation, how is Charles, how
Yeah.
is he, how is Charlie, is he good? And it just shows that I'm not just focused on the one topic, that I want the best for them in overall. And I think that that makes for a better relationship. Certainly, if you're dealing with your financial advisor and the only thing he ever talks to you about is finances, I might suggest that you should look for a different financial advisor.
I
You
agree with
need
you.
one who's interested in you
Exactly.
overall.
It's a two-way relationship. You need to get on with them, and they need to get on with you.
Quite.
And it is a friendship that you're building over a long period of time. The longest client I've got is somebody that I took on board 25 years ago. I've seen the children grow up and everything. I had a colleague of mine, I had a meeting with him last week, and we were discussing the relationship with our clients. And he got an invite to one of his clients' daughter's wedding. And this client was almost in tears and said, you know something, had it not been for you, this wedding could never have happened. Because he's helped him with so much with his finances. And he got a bottle of, over Christmas, he got a very expensive bottle of whiskey from one of his clients because it made him so much money. So that you build a relationship with these people.
But it's not just about making the money, I don't think.
No.
I think it makes it easier for you to second guess what they're trying to achieve if you understand more about their lifestyle and what their needs and wants are. And
Exactly.
you can only find this out through having a sensible conversation that goes beyond just what the job title is.
Yes.
It needs to encompass the stresses and strains upon them, so that you understand that their finances are just part of that.
Yes. And, you know, if people are trusting you to take care of their finances, obviously it's important to get to know the person that's taking care of the finances. And for me, it's the same thing in reverse. Once I get to know them and what they're trying to achieve, it makes it so much easier, as you've said so many times, it makes it so much easier for me to plan for them. And also, if I hear of something, I think, oh, that'll be ideal for that person, because I know about that person.
Exactly. And I think it just from a human perspective, it makes it a lot easier for you to know and remember things about your clients if it's come about through a warm, empathic conversation, because it lodges itself in your brain. And in the same token, they'll remember things about you, and it will create a far more familial atmosphere rather than I'm using this person to get better financial advice. It should be almost that you become an overall a friendly familial advisor, and of which finance is part of it. Let me just, before we go, because we're going to wind this up, and I'm going to ask you to summarize your thoughts on prepping for the year ahead. I want to draw everybody's attention. You may notice at the top of our lovely classic Swedish village scene that we've got behind us here, that there's a QR code. It's not there by chance. If you want to initiate conversation with Jiten, I think you should scan that and find your way to him. Also, you can always find him on LinkedIn. He's not frightened and hiding his light under a bushel. He's there to help you. And as we've said already on this stream a number of times, the best way of doing exactly that is through conversation. Jiten, would you summarize your thoughts on prepping for the year ahead? And then we'll leave this good people in peace.
Okay. I think everybody should sit down and with a pen and paper and write down what their assets are and their liabilities are. Okay, this is really important. If you can write down your assets and liabilities, that's a good starting point. So we know where you are today. What I then need you to do is have a look at what your goals are for the next 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, 15 years. It doesn't matter. But just have some specific goals that you're trying to achieve. For this year, what you might want to be doing is say, okay, where do I want to be this time next year? So we know where you are now. And if you want, I can help you work a game plan out and where you want to get to by the end of the same time next year. So it's planning, but also let people know what you actually have. but make a list of everything, write it down.
There we go. Making a list, dare I say it, checking it twice. But no, the important thing is when you spend this time thinking about it, it will probably inspire you to think about other things you may have either put off or not even been cognizant of. Until the next time we talk, thank you so much for Jiten, for joining me. This is going to be a regular conversation. As you can see, it will meander around a variety of topics, but most of them to do with helping you make better financial decisions, especially if you're an expat in Sweden. Until the next time we talk, I wish you all very well. Keep your feet on the ground, but keep reaching for the stars. Bye-bye all, one and all. Bye-bye.